Welcome back to primary election coverage on 13 News Now. Plus, I'm Janet Roach.
And I'm Dana Smith. We have our entire team tracking the election tonight as those results come in. Here's what you need to know so far. So some races already called. Tim Anderson has clinched the 97th House District. And also this just now. Karen Carnegie has beat Blazin' Buckshot Bloom in Chesapeake's 89th district. This is just in right now. There are no runoff races. So in crowded races like Lieutenant Governor, we're still watching that one. Whoever gets the most votes advances, even if they don't get a majority. And the State Board of Elections will have these results certified by July 1st.
All right, we have crews covering all of the big races tonight. Our team is live across Hampton Roads, and we're going to start with Brianna Fallon. And Brianna, you're following a contest in Newport News, the Commonwealth's Attorney race.
Yeah, right now the energy is still high at Smoke Barbecue in Newport News, where Howard Gwynn and his supporters have gathered for several hours now. And I actually have Howard with me right here. Can you kind of tell me about how the day's been going right now at the polls?
It's been long and hot.
For sure. And, I know all the votes are not fully in yet, but, how is your team looking at them?
Well, what we do always is we trust the voters in our community. And we trust them, and they will make their decision. I understand when you're in an elected position, every 4 years you get a referendum on whether the citizens of Newport News want you to continue to exercise their power. And so I live with whatever decision they make because I trust them.
And how are you feeling right now?
Well, I'm tired. It's been a long day. And I went home and took a hot shower, and I haven't ate dinner yet, so I'm looking forward to eating dinner.
There you go. Well, thank you so much.
Welcome.
I do really appreciate you taking some time to speak with us.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, several people have showed up to the venue wearing blue re-elect Howard Gwynn shirts to show their support with the candidate. Supporters started to make their way to the gathering right after polls closed at 7. Throughout the night, folks continued to cycle in the venue, laughing and cheering, hoping to see Gwynn elected to be on the ballot in November. And right now, I also have Miss Julia Brown with me, who says she was at the polls from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. today.
Yes, so much excitement, so much energy. We just, was out there doing our thing all day. And Howard Gwynn.
Was there a good turnout today?
It was not what we expected, but people turned out. But we still wait for those results to come in, so we're excited.
And can you just talk to me about the energy here tonight? I mean, you've been here for hours now.
Yes, the energy is high. Everybody's eating food, celebrating, and just waiting for the final results.
And I'm sure, what are you hoping for tonight?
Win. Howard Gwynn for the win.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Brown. It was so nice meeting you. And for the first time in more than 30 years, Newport News' Commonwealth's Attorney Howard Gwynn is facing an opponent in the primary election, and that's Shannon Jones, former assistant Commonwealth attorney who currently works as the city's legal advisor in the city attorney's office. We did reach out to Jones and her campaign, but we are still waiting to hear back. Live in Newport News, Brianna Fallon, 13 News Now.
All right, Brianna, thank you so much for that update on that race. Now, in Chesapeake, voters made a choice for sheriff today. Incumbent Daniel Rosado is facing challenger Wallace Chadwick. Emily Harrison is covering that race. She's live in Chesapeake tonight. Hey, Emily.
Hello there. We are going to be live in Chesapeake right now, where we are closely watching this race for sheriff. I'm going to be standing at Wallace Chadwick's location right now, and you can see a little bit of the crowd over here behind me. There were some cheers going on earlier. You can hear a few of them now, as the energy and excitement here is really palpable in this area. But of course, let's go ahead to one of the candidates. It's going to be Wallace Chadwick, who is again one of these candidates. So tell me, how are you feeling here tonight?
We're feeling really good. We're very excited about it. We have good momentum going into today, and I couldn't be more happy with the volunteers. It takes a village to do something like this, and I'm really happy with the way the campaign went and all my volunteers. So thank you to all the voters who came out today, regardless of how you voted. I'm really proud of doing what I'm doing, and thank you to Chesapeake for allowing me to do this.
Now talk to me about this campaign that you ran here and about all these people that are behind you. I mean, how has it been, this entire process for you?
So this has been a long campaign. This has been a campaign of change, and the people you see here represented tonight represent that change. Everyone we talked to wanted to talk about change and wanted to do things differently in the sheriff's office and take it in a different route, and that's what I'm representing. I don't come from the system of the sheriff's office. I come from the police department. I come from a different way of thinking, a different style of leadership. And that's what I hope to bring to the sheriff's office. And that's why all these people are here tonight supporting me for that change.
Now, to be clear, 13 News Now has not called this race just yet, but if you were to be elected, what are some of the most immediate changes that you would like to bring?
I think first and foremost, we need to come together as a party. I think we need to bring everybody together. You know, campaigns are rough on everybody, both sides of the party, both candidates. And I think we need to come together and heal some of that right out. This has been a well fought out campaign. There's been some stuff slung back and forth, and I think that's one of the things that first and foremost we need to change. Secondly, I'd like to get in and do a lot of things differently in the sheriff's office. You know, I've talked about culture, I've talked about transparency, I've talked about accountability, and those are some things that I'm going to bring to the sheriff's office if I'm allowed to and if I win this race.
And now you are a police officer that could be going over to the sheriff's office. I mean, do you expect that there might be a couple of looks? Are you anticipating that?
No, I'm anticipating that. Before I even started this, I talked to my command staff. You know, we had a good conversation about how this transition would happen if I were to win. And again, that was 2 years ago. The police department and the city officials have been very, very supportive of this race for me. You know, it's the American way. You know, you bring two candidates up, you talk about qualifications, and the constituency gets to decide who's the best choice. And that's what they're going to do here tonight.
All right, well, best of luck to you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Now, this wasn't the only watch party that 13 News Now went to. That's going to be some of the cheers for Chadwick, of course. But again, this was not one of the only watch parties that we went to. We went to Dave Rosado's camp earlier today, and the same excitement that you heard was the same excitement that we heard at Rosado's. He told me earlier that he thinks that he ran a great campaign and that he doesn't believe that his time is over just yet.
I know that if it is his will, we will prevail, and I truly believe it is. I didn't come this far to not continue.
Now, again, we will be meeting up with Rosado later tonight as we closely watch these results. 13 News Now is going to continue to keep you updated on everything that you need to know. But live in Chesapeake, I'm Emily Harrison, 13 News Now.
All right, thanks so much, Emily, for that. All right, let's get back to one of the big races across the state, the Democratic Lieutenant Governor's Contest. Taking a look at the results on 13newsnow.com. It's tight. LeVar Stoney, Ghazala Hashmi, Aaron Rouse at the top right now. Very close. Alex Littlehels is live at Senator Rouse's campaign party tonight. So, Alex, what is the mood like there?
I would say cautiously optimistic. I would say that people are still filing in slowly into the official campaign party here. They are watching the results, and as you had mentioned, you know, they are seeing that LeVar Stoney and State Senator Ghazala Hashmi have about a 2% difference in vote tallies above Aaron Rouse, but as we have been noting, you know, there are still hundreds of precincts that have not been tallied yet. Many of those in Hampton Roads, which we know Aaron Rouse is performing very strongly in right now. And I would say more than half of the precincts across Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, the main cities in the Hampton Roads region, those precincts have reported. And Aaron Rouse is performing, way outperforming the other 5 candidates in the field. The question now, as you alluded to, becomes how well could he do in areas like Richmond, Northern Virginia, perhaps parts of Southwest Virginia. As you're seeing from those vote tallies, that is where Hashmi and Stoney are currently leading the pack at this point. But, you know, it is far too early to call one way or the other. So we'll just have to wait and see. There's been at least one appearance from Congressman Bobby Scott about an hour ago. He walked through here as well. So people are just, you know, patiently waiting and patiently awaiting these results. And I think that one main takeaway and one key takeaway that we're going to find from this election cycle specifically is the balance between early voting and day of voting. So I talked a little bit about this in the last hour, but between 2021 and 2025, there was a plus 70,000 early voting differential between the two Democratic primaries. It's worth saying that obviously primary voting is a lot less than a general election, especially this year when you do not have a gubernatorial race at the top of the ticket. It is an off-year election. We are just coming off of a presidential election. So for those reasons, one could probably anticipate that the early voting or just the total voting for this primary would be less. But what we did find, or what we are finding, at least talking to some elections officials in Virginia Beach, is that the early voting, like the statewide metrics, early voting really outpaced this year compared to 2021, almost triple the amount of early votes here in Virginia Beach compared to 2021. We don't have the final numbers yet on this, but what we know from the day of voting for this Democratic primary is that in 2021, there were roughly 17,000 votes cast day of, and as of about 4 o'clock this afternoon, there were less than 7,000 day of votes cast. So not exactly the triple the metrics that we were seeing from the early voting pool of votes. That didn't exactly appear to translate to the day of voting. So that is certainly a storyline that will probably be looked at by news outlets across Virginia when they look at this lieutenant governor and attorney general races, and all of the lawmaking races up for grabs tonight is what exactly were the voting trends like in an off-year election following a major presidential election. So that's the sentiment here. People are still just patiently waiting and hoping that the precincts that have yet to report in Hampton Roads come out and that they are still overwhelmingly in favor of Rouse. And so I think that's I'd say that's the sentiment here at Rouse's watch party tonight.
All right, thank you so much, Alex. Well, it's time to check in with our political analyst, Dr. Eric Claville, and Professor Dr. Leslie Coggle. So let's talk about this lieutenant governor's race. It is crowded. 6 candidates, 3 are really standing out right now. We've got Rouse, Hashmi, and Stoney. Let's start with you. What are your thoughts on these 3 coming out right now, but still kind of early and it's still really tight?
You know, this was always going to be a tight race. We have some very strong candidates from population centers, too. So they had bases of voters that they were really relying upon. So yeah. I think you're going to see this one as a nail biter. And of all the races that we were looking at today, I think this is the one that struck me as most likely to be an upset and really close.
Interesting. All right, Dr. Claville, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, again, I have to agree. You know, you look at these 3 established public servants, right? LeVar Stoney, 2-time mayor of Richmond, also served in the gubernatorial administration. In addition to that, you look at Senator Rouse and his history here and his rise in politics here in Virginia Beach and making his name across the state. And then you look at Senator Hashmi in the Henrico Richmond area. So those areas, they're going to carry those areas because they have great records there. The question becomes, how does Northern Virginia vote for these 3 candidates? And I believe that's where you're going to see the race tilt. It's going to be close.
Yeah.
We're looking at 1, 2, maybe 3 percentage points separating all 3. But I think it's going to end up in that area.
Right, and as you said, you were expecting this.
Yeah.
At a low, maybe winning number. Maybe you said 25-ish might kind of be the number we're going to aim for.
Yeah, 6 candidates is a lot to have in a race. And 3 candidates to be doing this well, kind of as we're going in this late, is an anomaly.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'll take it 25. I'll raise you 2.
Okay.
27.
27. 27 wins it.
Let's talk about the turnout as well. So we saw those early numbers come in, and there were a lot of early votes. But then once the polls opened today, it seems like those numbers tapered off a little bit. Now, it's a primary election, so things don't always get the same numbers as a general. What are your thoughts on the turnout so far?
Well, I believe that the enthusiasm of the Democratic Party primarily in this early voting period stems from what's taking place in Washington and the Trump administration. You look at the cuts, the executive orders, and the 100 days that the Trump administration went in and really transformed the federal government and really created a lot of chaos in many areas. Look at the cuts, federal cuts, the loss of jobs. You look at the talk of additional cuts coming out of Congress with the president signing it. So there's a lot of trepidation there, a lot of fear, but also a lot of excitement, enthusiasm to change the party over.
Right.
But likewise, when you look at the day of voting. Today is a muggy day. It's very humid, and it's a primary election. So you're going to get persons trickling in, but you're not going to get that general election push, especially with a non-presidential year.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just building on that, I think two things are striking. The numbers that really matter aren't the early voting numbers or same day. I think we should probably think about them in total. And in total, what this election turnout says is that Democrats are engaged, and they're more engaged than they were in 2021 in a more competitive gubernatorial primary at the top of the ticket. The other thing I think that we might be seeing is people are just changing how they think about voting. And early voting is really becoming something that people take advantage of and expect. So the idea that voting on election day is the only way you vote, I think is just not the norm anymore, particularly post-COVID. So I think you're probably going to see in subsequent elections similar trends where when people can, they take advantage of the convenience of early voting.
And we're talking about the type of people who come out to primaries, right? They can be a little bit more informed, maybe, sometimes than people who just show up on a general election. Do you think Republicans are taking note of this momentum that the Democrats have?
Well, I believe if they're not, they should be. And if you take a look at what happened in the last election cycle, where the House and the Senate basically stayed Democratic, the Republican mantra was they were against early voting before it was passed during the time of the Democratic administration here in the Commonwealth. Then the mantra was vote early. Early voting is the way to win. So if you look at what's taking place across the board, early voting, and like you said, don't look at it in the silo, but I think in this particular case, you have to because you have 45 days before the general election. And I think that this will carry forward in the November 4th election, especially when we see the actual policies of Washington and additional cuts. Really, we see the full effect of those happen in Northern Virginia and across the Commonwealth.
I agree, and President Trump does very strange things to elections. And one of the strange things he does is the people that turn out to vote for him are a different subset of people than normally vote. And one of the things that you see in these primary elections and these off-year elections is his mobilizing effect when those people who will vote for him, but not necessarily other Republicans, drop off. And I think when Republicans are looking at these numbers, part of what they're looking at is when President Trump is a force but not on the ticket, what does turnout look like? And particularly in a place like Virginia, there were a lot of Democrats on election night in like last November who were chomping on their nails going, I didn't expect it to be this close and called this late. So I think what you're seeing is not that same effect here. You're seeing a little bit more Democratic enthusiasm. Now, I think the wild card here is Republicans didn't have a particularly, competitive primary. What does Republican enthusiasm look like in November? And I think we'll see that, but clearly Democrats are engaged. In particular, some of the early voting numbers in Northern Virginia, Charlottesville, Richmond, they were just off the charts.
Yeah, that's interesting. Virginia, blue state, sometimes purple, so I guess we'll see.
Well, to your point, I think the overwhelming issue that we're going to see in the Commonwealth, really across the country, well, number 4 is the economy. How is the economy affecting both Democrats, Republicans, independents? These cuts that are coming down the pipe are real dollars, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, totaling in over $1 billion. And when you look at just kitchen table politics, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for that? With policies going into effect, they're going to increase costs. It's going to happen. It's just simple mathematics. So will that economic message be the prevailing issue in which turns people on to vote or turn them off to vote? I think it's all about the economics.
Yeah, and really setting the tone kind of just of politics at this point.
Absolutely.
Let's move on. The Attorney General race. It's a tight one on the, between the two Democratic candidates. Too tight to call, maybe. We have two candidates, and they're both pretty solid on the Democratic side. What are your thoughts on this result? Do you think it's going to go clear one way or the other, or we're going to be right at the end trying to figure this out?
I mean, I think this one is going to be a nail-biter, too. You have candidates, and again, candidates that aren't necessarily that different ideologically and on policy. So for both of their campaigns, a lot of what they're just looking at doing is turning out the areas in which they needed to turn out. So most of this race, I think, is just looking at where the election results that are still outstanding are coming in from.
No, I totally agree. You have two candidates that are well established in their areas. And again, we're talking primary election. We're talking about individuals that are connected to this, to politics, to what's going on, and that will support individuals. Again, the question becomes, what is the other part of the state, the Northern Virginia, the Southwest Virginia state? How will they vote and how will they turn this election? The other part of it is that I think optics at this point, I think may play a little bit in this primary election. But I think you have, of course, someone who has served in the House of the House of Delegates, someone who has family members that are part of the legal legacy.
Yeah, well known.
Right, that are well known, and then someone who is also saying, hey, I've also served as a U.S. attorney as well. I think optics does matter, and I think that part will probably play in favor of the candidate here, Jay Jones, more so than the other candidate.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and I do think one of the things that shouldn't get lost for anybody as we're watching this election is we hear a lot of conversations about things like DEI. This is a diverse ticket. Regardless of which candidates win in these closely contested races, you are looking at gender diversity, kind of racial diversity, diversity in terms of sexuality on this ticket in ways that we have not seen before.
Immigration.
And
nationalization.
There's so much. And the other thing I would say is Virginia is an off-year election state. So is New Jersey. And one of the other things people are watching is the type of candidates who are winning. And what we saw in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago, and I think what we're seeing here, is it's not off-the-wall, very extreme candidates who seem to be kind of running away with it. It's candidates who are speaking to many of these kind of basic issues that motivate voters, and in ways that kind of seem, if not moderate, centrist.
And that's kind of what you were saying, just the kitchen table issues seem to be kind of dominating how voters are moving forward on this ballot, on this ticket.
And I agree. I think voters want normalcy. They want individuals that can govern, individuals who are qualified, individuals that are going to bring things back into some working order where common sense rules as opposed to non-common sense.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Commonwealth's attorneys' races. So there's two. We heard from Howard Gwynn tonight, and that race is unique in that, you know, he's running against Shannon Jones. He's been there since 1990s, you know, and he hadn't faced a challenger in a primary election. He's been there, and he's been a steady presence. Still early, but Shannon Jones picking up votes. What do you think that says to see someone who's an incumbent for decades finally facing someone?
You know, there's a lot to be said for incumbency in terms of advantages and name recognition, but one of the things we are increasingly seeing with voters is concerns about age and having been in a position too long. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with it, because a lot of times one of the things that being in a position in 30 years does is it makes you really good at that position.
You're experienced, you're stable.
Yeah, to the extent that I think a lot of people are looking at politics right now and they're like, I don't like the status quo. I think 30 years might not speak in quite the same way. Experience might not weigh as much as the idea that, you know, maybe
voters want change,
voters
they want someone fresh.
Change, and this can be really frustrating, I think, to a lot of people who are interested in politics. Experience and like ability should speak to somebody's kind of competence and ability to run things well, but change for so many people can exist as a positive thing independent of how well we're going to do the job.
Right.
We just need to upset something.
What are your thoughts?
Well, sometimes it's not a bad thing to go out on top. And sometimes being in a position for years, you become stale. And when I say stale, it's not that you're not good at what you do. It's not that you're not effective. But especially in politics, are you relevant to your constituency? And I think that's part of also what you're saying. And are you speaking to the time? So, you know, in an era where Brooks Brothers suits, you know, and three-piece were the way to go for corporate, we're not seeing that now. So it's not saying it's a bad way to dress. We're just saying it's a different time. And I think voters also look at that.
That's fair, because they're both, again, good candidates. You know, there's really nothing that sticks out that's wrong with anyone. It's just a matter of which way are voters going. The Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney's race, that's kind of been a little contentious with this idea of the petty larceny seemed to have kicked off this back and forth between city leaders, the mayor, and the incumbent Ramin Fadahi. Again, let's start with you, Dr. Coggle. What do you make of this race that's been run between Butler and Fadahi and this kind of behind-the-scenes drama, maybe?
This one is so fascinating because of that behind-the-scenes drama. It is not the usual to have a sitting mayor come out against somebody who's in office. And I think this speaks to an issue that divides Democrats, and Democrats have a consistent problem with, which is how to deal with questions of crime. Because regardless of what you think about crime numbers, people's perceptions of crime don't always map onto the realities, and there are racial undertones to that all day. So for Democrats, this can be a particularly hard issue to address. So how do you acknowledge voters' concerns and do things to alleviate some of the problems they have when, you know, some of their perceptions might not be rooted in reality? So I think that's a long way of saying this is a really interesting race, and I think is emblematic of something that Democrats are going to struggle with talking about, which is questions of crime.
Yeah, Dr. Clavell, I also want to ask you, and for those at home, the issue is who should prosecute this petty larceny. The mayor wants a stronger hardline stance on it, and Ramin Fadahi is taking more of a sort of social justice aspect. What are your thoughts?
Well, the Commonwealth's attorney in Norfolk now is one of the last progressive Commonwealths or district attorneys that we have left in the United States that won during the time of the Black Lives Matter and that kicked off with the murder of George Floyd, live on television, streaming across the world. With that, individuals started to look at crime and criminal justice being smart as opposed to harsh, but still getting results, lowering crime rates and keeping communities safe. But, you know, when you talk about crime itself, whether it be petty larceny or whether it be violent crime, individuals become concerned, and being tough on crime and showing, you know, how things could turn if you're not tough on crime still plays very well in a 15, 30-second commercial bite. Because you're playing on fears, part of the old Southern strategy, right? So the question becomes, how is the message resonating with the constituents? In the communities where a person convicted of petty larceny could lose 12, 24, maybe 36 months of their livelihood, or a business owner that's losing $500, $1,000, $1,500 of merchandise on a consistent basis. And what communities are being hit the hardest? So that's the real message. How is that communicated, and what do the constituents of Norfolk really want?
Absolutely.
It's such a hard thing to communicate too, because if you pay attention to Butler's messages, he was talking about being harsh on crime. At the same time, he was like, we got to talk about preventing it. So it's this very clear understanding that this is a tightrope that we're walking here in terms of how do we demonstrate that we're interested in preventing crime, ensuring crime doesn't happen, ensuring that you don't experience crime. At the same time, what we're not doing is creating just a pipeline of people who end up having their lives derailed by, you know, stealing something from CVS.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Again, another tight race, still early. We're going to be keeping an eye on all of these all night long. I'll send it back to you, Janet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And there are also a lot of smaller races that had primaries today. We had primary battles for House of Delegate seats, including the 70th, 89th, and the 97th districts. And as we mentioned at the top of our update, the 89th and 97th districts have been called. Karen Carnegie wins the 89th District Democratic primary, and Tim Anderson won the GOP primary in the 97th District. There is also a primary for the Newport News Treasurer and Norfolk Commonwealth's Attorney. We talked about that, and the results for all of these elections will be on 13newsnow.com. All right, and we're also going to have more analysis on these races through the night and on 13 News Now at 11, so stay tuned.
And to keep watching the results here on your TV, just leave the 13 News Now Plus app open to see the latest numbers. We'll be back with another live update at 10 p.m.